We all have those rides that we love and won't let go of. Sometimes we're stuck with only the memories of rides past. But sometimes the ride stands there in front of us with its carcass rotting, mocking us like a bad dream. But what would it be like to bring rides like Superman the Escape, Desperado, and Speed the Ride back from the dead?
Now get ready. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? All right, today's video, I want to talk about bringing rides back from the dead. This is a subject that the two go hand in hand with each other. It's typically relocation of rides and bringing rides back from the dead. They're kind of the same thing, but we're going to go over two instances here. So first, we're going to start with bringing rides back from the dead. All right, now, what is a ride that's died? Okay, well, this is a ride that is standing but not operating. We know a lot of these rides around, there's tons of them, but we're going to pick a couple, and we're going to say like Superman the Escape over there at Six Flags Magic Mountain. The ride is standing there but not operating. The future of the ride is written in the ride's past. For every ride that is standing but not operating, there is a reason why it's standing but not operating. So in Superman's case, the ride's control system and the entire drive system was just getting too archaic. It was too old. And then on top of that, the ride wasn't getting a lot of attention. It kind of just doesn't hit any of the categories. It's not maintenance friendly. It doesn't have spare parts. The manufacturer doesn't really support it that much anymore. So there's a lot of things going into that decision. So you can step back a little bit further and you could say, well, let's look at Buffalo Bill's resort out there, the Desperado. What's going on with that? Well, Buffalo Bill's just went under. They just went out of business. So before that, they were trying to cut cost and save money. So what was it? Well, their throughput was down, ridership was down, people at the casino and hotel was down. So they said, well, let's stop running the roller coaster because that costs us a lot of money to operate. And it does. There's a lot of track inspection, track repairs. That's an old aerodynamic coaster. There's all sorts of things that go into that. Coasters in general eat up a lot of money. It's one of the #1 reasons why coasters are snowballed in general. It's because they just eat up so much money, whether it be physical money up front because of annual inspections and things like that, or it's money such as in high maintenance costs, like the ride keeps breaking parts or constantly goes through parts. So the cost of operation is not great return for the particular company running it. Now, we move a little bit down the strip there in Vegas and we go to NASCAR Cafe. Used to have Speed the Ride. Awesome ride. I've actually been on that one. Buffalo Bills, I haven't. But that was a great ride. But it was one of the things the Sahara Hotel took that one out. The real reason, not quite known. I mean, it's always one of those things that just didn't fit anymore. They got rid of the NASCAR Cafe. But it was the same type of thing. They didn't want to boil down to maintain that particular piece of equipment. That is a premier ride. They didn't want to pay for the power, the stators, the refurbishment of the trains and everything else. So it's one of those things. How do parks or places go about reviving stuff from the dead? Well, there is a very fine line to walk for this instance because what has been done in the past dictates the ride's future. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, how the ride was stopped operation, how they stopped using it, will dictate what happens in the future to it. Let's start with Speed the Ride. Speed the Ride is actually sitting in a lot that particular company owns, the Sahara MGM maybe, I can't remember who owns that, but it's a lot that's still sitting in Vegas. You could see it on aerial maps. It's out by Mandalay Bay, across the street there, and you could actually go to this lot and look at Speed the Ride. All the steel is still sitting there, all the stators are there, all the track, all the structure is still there. Some of the pieces I heard have been sold off for scrap essentially. But where are the trains? Well, the trains aren't there. We don't know where the trains are. I've heard from people that they were pretty sure that the trains were sold off as well. Where did they go? I don't know. So the cost of reviving that ride would mean you would have to fully install it somewhere, probably replace 100% of the drive, and then purchase new trains. So what could they have done differently? Well, if Sahara pulled that roller coaster out with the intent that they were going to put it somewhere else or they were going to reinstall it somewhere, then they were going to say, okay, let's put this somewhere nice, climate controlled maybe, in a warehouse, at least the drive system, controls, stators, things like that, that can't be outside just sitting there being pounded day after day by the hot Las Vegas sun. Now, one of the other things that makes this very difficult, because this is now talking about, well, the Sahara is not going to reinstall that in the exact same location they have it. So, what's going to happen with that install if someone were to try to, let's say, purchase that ride? Well, you would have to deal with the topography that the coaster was installed on. So, if the coaster was installed on a hill or something like that, you would have to redo those footings. You would have to make larger elevations. If that went up the side of the building, you would have to make these very large footings for that to sit on. Is anyone going to do that? No, probably no one's going to do that. Is the footing still there over at Sahara? I really doubt that they're still there, but honestly, I don't know that one. So let's look a little bit forward and say Buffalo Bills. What can they do to open that back up? Well, Buffalo Bills went out of business. So what's that mean? That means that it is officially, it's one of their assets that is marked down, that's out of business with the rest of the hotel. So for someone to say, let's put that roller coaster back in operation, they would have to buy the Buffalo Bill Hotel, that entire area. They would have to buy the whole thing just to get that asset out of there. Now, could someone else approach it and say, hey, I want to purchase that roller coaster? Yeah, you could. Now you're into the topic of relocating roller coasters. Now, I do have a video on relocating roller coasters, so I don't want to get too nitty gritty into that topic. If you want to watch that video, I'll see if I can link it. But I do have a video on relocating roller coasters if you want to watch that one. But for Buffalo Bill, what are they going to do? It's like, well, if they intended to use the ride in the future, they had to do things and do what's called laying up. They had to lay up certain components and parts and pieces so they could use it in the future. Now, time is always the variable on these rides. If you're going to lay something up for a short period of time and you know it's going to be a year or two, you could just do certain things to protect stuff in place. What do those things involve? Well, the chain is a big one. If the chain gets rusty, it's pretty much destroyed. You can't do that. So what you do is you go out there and you cover the chain, both with like plastic boards on the trough. You could cover the chain and put grease, literally grease, all over the chain. What you're trying to do is you're trying to protect the steel from the outside areas. You're trying to protect it from the sand that's in the wind out there. You're trying to protect it from anything like rain and stuff like that. So you want to grease everything that's bare steel. You go around the ride, anything that's bare steel that you could see, whether it's an output shaft from a motor, whether it's a gearbox, whether it's the top of a booster wheel, anything like that, you'd want to cover that stuff in grease. There was a grease that we used in shipping. That's when new parts are shipped to you. Had to Google it. That's what it is. It's Cosmoline. Cosmoline is used when manufacturers ship parts overseas, because all the times manufacturers will machine a large metal surface off the side that is a very precise surface, but they don't want that getting damaged. Now, if it runs into something like they didn't pack the component properly, that's one story. I mean, you can't really prevent for that. That's just proper shipping. But if it's on a boat overseas, which a lot of track and things like that are, and it has to have that bare metal finish on there, they put Cosmoline on the surface, which is a combination of kind of like a grease and a wax put together. It makes a protective coat around the outside of that surface so that when it gets there, it's a pain in the butt to clean off, but when you clean it off, the steel underneath is nice and clean. It's been protected the entire time. There would also be some of this stuff that, depending on how long it's laid up, you would have to go redo this stuff as well. If you're going to lay up the chain and grease it, every couple of years, every 2 years, you're probably going to have to go out and grease the chain again, because all of that grease has been washed away eventually by UV light, water, and everything else has broken it down. So you're going to have to pick the old stuff off and kind of put new stuff on. Does this become dangerous for the equipment? Yes, it does, because if you grease things in the wrong way, it can actually create a pocket where water would just funnel through, and now you're rusting things from the inside out. So you do kind of have to be careful on that. Another thing that always happens is electrical. Electrical does not like to sit for a long period of time. Drives and things like that, they need to be power cycled. It's more and more parks companies, everybody else in general is figuring out that, hey, when we store an electric drive on the shelf to be used, it can't just sit there off forever. We actually have to put power to it and kind of run the drive every couple of years in order to ensure that when we need it, all its components work on the inside. The drive kind of does this weird thing like it kind of dries out on the inside and the components become no good. And then if you sit on the shelf for 10 years and suddenly go to power it up one day, it could just fail on you altogether. Very first time, brand new part, you put power to it, and it goes away. Now, the vehicles are a completely different story because they have lots of consumable parts on them. Like what type of consumable parts? Not so much the steel components, but anything that is rubber. So we're talking road wheels, guide wheels, upstop wheels. We are talking any sort of padding, whether it be seat padding, whether it be headrest padding, restraint padding, anything like that. That stuff over time naturally just dries out. Even sitting in a good dark location, nice air climate controlled and everything, it eventually goes out and dry cracks and it falls apart. So even though it's brand new stuff, if you take a brand new wheel and sit it on the shelf for 10 years and come back to use that wheel, it's almost going to delaminate on you probably the very first cycle. The tread is just going to come off because this tread will just dry crack and then break right off when it gets underneath load. It's lost its elasticity, its plasticity. It's lost all of that characteristic to it that makes it work. The same thing with the foam padding on the restraints. If it's just sitting there and it's not used forever, it will eventually become dry cracked. Now, it might not fall apart, but people jigging their fingers into it and stuff like that, it'll come apart pretty quickly after that. Now, if you didn't do any of the layup things and those are just sitting outside in the weather, then they're destroyed after just a year or two. Not to mention all the finite components and restraint mechanisms and everything else. Those things will start to rust internally, and you, instead of having this nice finite restraint claw left, like a mechanical claw inside of there, instead of that thing working the way it's supposed to, it is just one solid chunk of metal afterwards. That didn't work at all. Now, let's go a little bit further west. Superman the Escape. That thing is still sitting there. It looks like it's in perfect working condition, of course, but that's because it's got a ride attached to it. It's got Lex Luthor's Drop of Doom, if I'm remembering that correctly, attached to the side of it. So they still have to maintain the structure, the paint, everything else. So it can't just sit there and like completely rot away. But what's happening on the other side? Is there a chance they could use it in the future? Well, they stopped using it, like I said earlier, because the drive system is just too old, outdated, and the engineering for the train, the coach, I should say, everything is just off on that. It would have to be rebuilt from the ground up. So that would be the company's initiative if they wanted to do that. They would have to either go back to the original manufacturer and come up with some brand new thing, install a 100% new drive system on there, and to do what? To put a ride back up in operation that not a lot of people really wanted to do in the first place. The lines were never crazy long for the ride, except for when it was brand new. And the cost of maintenance was through the roof on the ride. So they clearly have to like redesign the ride to get it back up into operation. Could they do it? Yes, they could. But how was the thing laid up? If we're talking about a new drive system, well, they don't care about the stators or anything else. But something to watch is that the track and structure. Obviously, they need the tower at the end because that's what Lex Luthor's Drop of Doom is sitting on. So that has to be kept in condition. Now, where the weird gray area in that particular ride is the rest of the track that goes out there, the acceleration part of the track. Once you leave that tower forward, that's essentially the end of Drop of Doom and the start of Superman the Escape. That's not being used anymore. But the way that ride is, you can't just take that in California. You can't just say we're going to let Superman the Escape completely fall apart because it's like, well, that's part of the structure. And if you say, well, it's not, it's this part over here, then you have to do what's called, in California, it's called a major modification to the ride. And you need engineering to sign off that this structure can be stopped here. And then they're going to want to see it disconnected. So if they say like, oh, the Superman Tower has no, that's just going to be Lex Luthor's Drop of Doom now and nothing else, and we want to let the rest of the ride rot, we're not going to inspect the track and structure at all. California would say, okay, but probably, that curve that's going up to the tower, probably say, you're going to have to disconnect those two components. So we now have a physical disconnect there, and the two aren't relying on each other. Well, then you need engineering to state that the tower can stay there by itself. Now, Drop of Doom's kind of an odd one. I'll get off topic for a second. When you look at Superman's tower, it's not perfect inline straight. It's actually straight this way, and then it's kind of offset like this. There's kind of an offset, like a dog leg step in it. So realistically, my opinion, you need the weight of that curve to keep that whole tower standing straight up and down the way Intamin originally designed the thing. All right, so I've got an email from someone. They asked a good question. Let's go over that. This email says, do you know anything about what it would be like to reopen a coaster that hasn't ran in years? For example, there are two B&Ms in China that were built in 2015, but due to some reason, they were never opened and have just been sitting there ever since. If those were to get purchased by, let's say, a US park, what kind of maintenance and expenses do you think would be required to get them in operation? Now, so we're in that territory again. So they were built in one park. Now the question's asking, if they were relocated to another park. Again, that's my relocation video. That's a whole different can of worms. Again, if you want to watch that video, I'll try to remember to put a link in the description for that video. But basically, so let's look at, say, this park in China will now reopen those. They will open those two coasters. It's like, okay, so something happened. What happens most of the time? Most of the time, these people run out of money. They're putting something together and they run out of money. So the first thing that happens is coasters, just like cars, are purchased in installment plans. So as they are purchasing the coaster, it's not lump sum. The company doesn't hand the full lump sum over to the ride manufacturer on day number one. So a portion of the cost is due when they sign the contract. Another portion, let's just use quarters. First quarter is due at when they sign the contract. The second quarter is due when they start to deliver parts. The third quarter is due when they finish delivering the parts. And the fourth quarter is due at the finish of commissioning of the ride. So once the ride is running. So at this point, we're going to say, like, though those parks in China, they ran out of money. Let's just say they ran out of money at the 60% mark. So at 60%, the manufacturer has already paid for all the materials that they used. The manufacturer is essentially done with building it. They're like, okay, they're done. Now, they're not going to get that last 25, 30% of what was left over. And then that's going to go through litigation. That's going to go through courts and stuff like that, because the manufacturer is going to make sure that if that park ran out of money, went out of business, whatever it was, has any money that they can give over, that they had a contractual obligation to supply the rest of that money. So that's the first step the manufacturer is going to do. The manufacturer won't go to their lengths to say, like, we're going to take it back, because it costs more money to remove a ride than they would anything else. And they're not just going to let it sit there. So it could be one of those things in the park's best interest and the manufacturer's best interest if they could sell that off to another park and relocate it. But realistically, it's kind of a rare thing that happens due to the litigation that's tied up around the loss of money for those parks that suddenly just run out of business. So let's talk about turning that thing back on. It's like, okay, it's 2015. Okay, so we are 11 years now in the future. Someone gets the money, they purchase the park, they dig out whatever it was, and they say, we're going to run those things now. What do we have to do? It's like, all right, first thing you got to do is you got to get with the manufacturer and figure out where they were in the installation process, because this was a new ride. This wasn't a used one. This was a new ride. So you have to make sure it's all installed and finalized. Then, kind of like I was talking about with the Desperado, you're going to now have to go through and replace anything rubber on the ride. Shock absorbers, shocks, rubber pads, all your wheels. Every single wheel is going to have to be replaced. Every single bearing is going to have to be replaced. The trains are probably going to have to be torn apart because we don't know where they were sitting. So the trains might as well at this point be shipped back to the manufacturer to be completely overhauled. Even though they probably never saw the track, they're going to have to be completely torn down, overhauled, and probably 30 or 40% of the train is going to have to be replaced. But then once you have that brand new, up and running, it comes back. All right, track and structure, what are we looking at? the chain that goes around the lift hill, assuming those are chain drives, that's an assumption on my part, the chain has to be replaced. Like, you got to pull that out and replace it. Were the gears and sprockets covered? Are those still in good enough condition after sitting out there in the elements for 11 years? Will they still accept the chain? So now you need the manufacturer of the chain, or a representative of that manufacturer, not B&M. This is going to be now Reynolds, or US Subaki or someone like that, to come out and look at the chain and say, yes, the gears are in good enough condition. Probably, I can almost guarantee you, no, we're going to have to replace the chain completely because that thing is rusted. That thing is trash. Get it out of there. Honestly, if it's sitting there for 11 years and no one laid it up and lubed it and covered it, you're probably going to end up cutting the chain out with a torch because that thing is probably one solid form now, just stuck there. Anything else in there that might be, let's look at booster motors. Booster motors are probably going to all have to be rewound because they've been sitting out in the elements for 11 years. They're not on, but the weather and stuff eventually gets inside the casing, especially with them not running, and they eventually just corrode from the inside out. Gearboxes, there's a good chance that the gearboxes were okay, but if they had any sort of moisture inside of them, they might be a rusty mess on the inside. But let's just say you're going to replace 25% of the gearboxes. Anything that was open metal is going to be replaced. You're going to be taking things apart with torches, putting it back together. That's because when this stopped, the manufacturer, I shouldn't say the manufacturer, the park probably had no intent to pick it back up. They're like, we're done. We're out of business. We're done for. We have nothing. And the thought wasn't, hey, let's go lay the ride up in case we come back to it in a year. The thought was, we're out of money. Send the people home. We don't have the money to do this anymore. So nothing was laid up on the ride. And now you also have the thing that, like, the B&M rails are generally coated, but if they were scratched, if the paint coating system was nicked anywhere, you might have now excessive rust on the structure. If this was a previously running coaster, if the thing was cycled for a bunch, everywhere where the wheels went is now rusting. It's all rusted apart. So it's like, you're going to have to go through, scrape all the rust off of it, maybe repaint the entire track and structure. So you're quickly approaching a substantial portion cost of the ride. You're probably coming up to 25 or 30% or more of the ride to get it back up and running. The question came up at one point, well, what about Six Flags New Orleans? It's like, okay, New Orleans was involved in a really bad flood. Now, the thing about floods is that you can't determine what happened to the ground. I have a video about weather and stuff like that as well. Go over this stuff a little more in detail. But once you can't determine what happened with the ground, you can't determine that if there was internal settling, if one footer is being pulled down more than one of the other ones, if something has raised up, if the structure has tweaked. You can resurvey everything. Great. It might be sitting where it's supposed to, but the problem is during that flood, you can't determine what happened. So everything is twisted, theoretically. Everything is both twisted and fine at the same time. It's Schrodinger's roller coaster, basically. Everything is perfectly fine and completely messed up all at the same time. And you don't know until you take it all apart and NDT everything, non-destructive testing, everything, then put it all back together. That's going to cost a lot of money that most people don't want. Also, when you want insurance on that roller coaster, insurance is going to say what exactly happened to it. And if you don't exactly know all the stresses involved, they're not going to get behind it either. If you've ever tried to put a salvaged car back on the road, insurance isn't going to get behind a salvaged car because they don't know what happened to it while it was in the junkyard or anything else. So they're going to be like, nope, we're not going to insure that. It's the same thing with a ride. If they don't know everything that's happened to it, insurance companies won't get behind it, typically. Now, if you did all the right steps and everything, put it back together, they could. But for the purposes of bringing something back from the dead, most insurance companies get together with engineers and they're like, okay, just put it in the trash can. That's the easiest thing to do. Put it in the trash can. End of answers. Could it come back? Yeah, it could come back. Extreme cost to the company, extreme engineering to the company. It really has to be something worthwhile. And I don't know these days, in the era of disposable everything if a lot of rides fall into that category of worthwhile. I know a lot of these rides that I've listed don't fall in the worthwhile category. There's bigger, there's better, there's more efficient, there's newer stuff out there. The cost of getting Speed the Ride back up and running would probably rival the cost of building the ride brand new to something else. I mean, that's one of the things it looks like. That's one of the things that happened with Montezuma's Revenge. It looks like they went through and they said, okay, we're going to get new trains, we're going to get new drive systems, and then it eventually just started hitting everything else. Oh, and this, oh, and that. And by the way, we had to remake the loop and all these other things. Well, all those things also took place in the middle of the Six Flags Cedar Fair merger. So that put a stop on everything because that was active money flowing from one party to another. And while the merger was happening, they had to say, nope, nobody touched this. This project is essentially dead. And then once the merger happened and everything started going again, they got their finances back in line and they were able to safely say, yep, we could pick back up on this project again. We see work now on. And we got new stuff out there. Can't wait to ride that ride when it opens up. What do you think out there? What do you think about bringing rides back from the dead? Is there something you'd love to see come back from the dead? Now, I'm talking back from the dead, so it's got to be pretty much standing but not operating. If it's removed completely from a park, I'd say that's off the list. If it says, well, it's got to be moved from this park to that park, it's a relocation, so in my mind, that's off the list. You got a ride at your close park that's standing but not operating, and you got an idea to bring it back? What is it? Let everybody know in the comments downstairs. If you want to get a hold of me, you can always email me at ryantheridermechanic@yahoo.com. Please like, subscribe, share if you made it this far in the video. I do appreciate that. That stuff helps me out. Make more videos and keep everybody coming back for more. All right, I'm Ryan the Ride Mechanic. Stay off the air gates.